So today on Let Out the Clutch, brought to you by My Biker Attorney, I have Marty out of AMS Ducati out of Dallas. Marty, thank you for being here today.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Marty, I've known you as an acquaintance, I guess is the best way to put it, for more than a decade now. And I know you run into a lot of people. I don't expect you to recall our first meeting, but I do. It was following International Motorcycle Show in Dallas, probably 2014. And I was having a craving for a Ducati at the time, and there was not a dealership in Oklahoma. And I was in love with the blue and white Ducati, and you guys had one for sale. In the 2013 was that model. You remember that?
Sure. The Diablo.
The Diablo with the blue and the white wheels.
Yes, I remember. Yep.
I had come down for the IMS show, called ahead and asked you if I could do a demo ride. And I think you had a black one I could ride, and you had it sitting outside. And then I signed the paperwork to do the demo ride, and I was talking to you, and I said, look, I can ride a motorcycle. I don't need a supervision, but I would like to have someone that can show me where to ride. So you went on the test ride with me, and I think you grabbed a promoter or something like that and took me through downtown Dallas and went for a ride. It was one hell of a day. But I think that's where we met in about the bike came out in 2013, so I think it was probably later that year or 2014 when we met. But thank you for being on the show today.
I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, I love the idea.
Now, you've been a Ducati guy forever, have you not?
It feels like it. I started out on Suzuki's, actually, as just an enthusiast. And then it's a really fun story, actually, if you want me to go into it.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so got out of Texas A&M. Both my parents were high school teachers, so from my perspective, just getting out of college and working I went to work for Best Buy. They were like, well, you've left college, and I worked there in the summers, and they were like, well, now that you're out, you can be a manager. And I'm like, what's the pay like? I want to go into environmental science, so I don't want to continue to do this. And I think they offered me, I can't remember the number, but it was more money than my mother was making after 35 years of teaching high school English. So from my perspective, I was making it. So I got my start in big box retail, Best Buy, and then shortly after Dick's Sporting Goods. In that time, a buddy of mine let me borrow and learn how to ride on a Suzuki GS 500.
What year was this? What time frame was this?
Oh, geez, this was 2005, 2006, I believe, somewhere around there.
So 20 years ago.
Yes, sir. I mean, it was just, as you probably can relate, and people who have never ridden a motorcycle absolutely cannot relate to, it was just freedom. And it was like a discipline that you have to learn. And that freedom, just the wind in your hair, started riding in an apartment parking lot pretty much. But I was working retail, got on these Suzukis, and I moved to Abilene for a few years. We grand opened a few Best Buys in West Texas, Abilene, San Angelo. When I moved back, I came back with Best Buy, and a buddy that I was working with goes, I went from a GS 500, my buddies, and then I bought my very first bike I bought out in Kent's Harley Davidson in Abilene. And it was, this is a funny story, it was an SV1000S. So,
at a Harley shop.
At a Harley shop. They sold Suzuki, but it was a Harley shop. And this is Abilene, so it's like, it's good old boy stuff out there. You know how when you get into motorcycling, and I see it all the time here, your friends, your family, they're looking out for you, and they want you to start with a small displacement motorcycle. They really don't want you to kill yourself and don't want you to harm yourself. So really, I was looking for a smaller displacement, and I was looking at, I can't remember what it was. It was just like another small 300cc, something that they had there, maybe even a Harley Sportster. But this old man with a huge white beard comes up. He's got long white hair, and he's like, what bike you looking at? And I was like, well, I really want that silver SV1000S Suzuki. But everyone tells me it's too big for me. So I think I have to go with this. And they were already working up the paperwork for me. And he goes, son, let me tell you something. It's not the Arrow, it's the Indian. If you're an idiot, you're going to kill yourself on that small bike just as fast as you are on that big bike. But if you respect that big motorcycle, you check those tire pressures, and you take your time and you learn, get the bike you want. Just old man wisdom. I was like, that's all I needed to hear. It put lead in my pencil. I was like, excuse me, salesman, I want that bike over there. Get me that thing. So anyways, I got started on that SV1000. That's when I really started riding, and that's a big bike, good torque, and I fell in love with twin cylinders. And when I moved back to the Metroplex, a buddy I was working with said, if you love twins, you need to go see the Ferrari of motorcycles. I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, just south of town, my brother works at the #1 Ducati dealership. You got to go check it out. The guy's an old road racer. They've got just crazy hardware in there. It's going to blow your mind. So I go down there, and pardon my speech to your listeners or to you, but you know, when you're young like that, and I can't remember, I was still in my 20s. I didn't have a pot to piss in, so to speak. But I walk in, and I see these Ducatis, and I was just like, oh, this is it. This is over with. Like, I will sell my soul to the devil for one of these red bikes. And I locked eyes with a 999S Parts Unlimited, one of 150. So Neil Hodgson and Ben Bostrom had signed the tail section.
Very cool.
And, you know, it had the Parts Unlimited livery, and it was only for the North American market. And I had to have it. And that's how I got started with Ducatis. If you want me to go on, I will.
Did Jeff hire you then, or did you come to work for him later?
No, I was a client through probably 2 years of being a client. So I did not immediately start working. I was working my way up through big box retail, and I bought that 999, even though they tried to talk me out of it, and they wanted me to buy the newer bike that was lighter and faster. I was like, no, I got to have this bike. Started doing track days. That's when I got into the track, was when I was a client with Jeff on the 999S. I was so hot and heavy about this. Jeff tells the story better than I do, but I was wrecking all the time trying to learn from Jeff. And I got to a point where if I wrecked before lunch, Jeff would have me load up the motorcycle back of my trailer, go to his shop in Alvarado, Texas. A technician would meet me there. They would fix the damage. I would drive back to Motorsport Ranch, Crescent, Texas, and continue riding and learning. But I bought a 999S, and then I bought a 749R from Jeff.
Okay.
And I think it was 2 years. Someone there was like, you should apply to work here. And I don't think Jeff wanted me. I believe he had a retired commander of the Navy and his wife working there at the time. They liked me. Jeff was like, he's a good guy, but he's a client. Let's not do that. But they went ahead and hired me. And I started working for them about 2 years later.
So that's been, what, 18 years ago then, or how long?
Just short of 18, I believe. I think it's going to be 18 this August, 18 years ago.
Now, Jeff and you guys have a fantastic shop down there, and I've not been there in a few years, but you used to have a nice collection of vintage bikes as well, almost a museum. Is that still in existence?
Yes, sir. Yes, there's a few shops like us that have some really cool bikes on display. The collection is just amazing. It's Jeff came from the South Island of New Zealand. Pretty much came here with a backpack, started wrenching on motorcycles, and he's probably a better guest than I'll ever be because of his storytelling and his history. But he moved here wrenching and then racing and worked his way up, became a 6-time AMA Pro Champion. But along the way, even when he was a kid and growing up in New Zealand, he was just the biggest motorcyclist you could ever meet, the biggest enthusiast. And along the way, he's just been collecting parts. He's been squirreling away parts forever. And going to auctions, going to swap meets since Jesus was a cowboy, pretty much. And there's very few people like him left that have squirreled all these parts away. So yes, we still have the museum stuff from, square cases, round cases, all the bevel drives, and all the way up to, new Superleggeras or the replicas. So yes, we still have that collection.
Yeah, your shop is something you need to stop by and see whether you're buying a bike tomorrow or not, because it's a pretty impressive place just to hang out.
It is, and that's part of motorcycling, right? Like a lot of it is the dealership should be an escape. It should be, people work hard and they want to play hard, and they'd like a place to kind of escape. And I see it all the time, and we want to provide that for people, and we also want to provide that. We want to represent Ducati and give them a salute because of their history and how hard they've been working. So yeah, you want to come in, get a cup of coffee, and see the history and see what's new. Give them an experience.
That's awesome. Now, I've also run into you down in Austin at MotoGP, and I want to talk about that for a minute because we're about 3 weeks away from that, I guess. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, I went to MotoGP for the first time about 10 years ago. I think it was 2015. I had to go back and look at some pictures. and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I was invited as a guest of somebody, but I have now become totally enthralled with MotoGP. So your involvement is with through AMS. Do you go down and support the event for Ducati? Is that what you do?
Correct. We used to just go down as fans, and it was recreation, and we got to cheer them on. Now since 2019, we missed, I believe, 1 year during COVID when they did not have the race, but since 2019, we are actually the official merchandise and apparel store for Ducati Island. And if people don't know what Ducati Island is, you should look it up. Pretty much internationally, nobody does it like Ducati does as far as putting on just an absolute spectacle. They show up with all the brand new bikes for the year, big semi-truck. There's another semi-truck that turns into a double-decker kind of presentation / DJ cafe. So when you sign up if you buy the Ducati Island tickets, you get to ride your Ducati into the track, and you bypass all those parking lots. You park, you can check in your gear, you can go get sparkling water and San Pellegrino, or you can get an espresso, check out the new bikes, and then in that Ducati Island, we are the apparel store. So actually, I haven't been able to enjoy a race since 2019. I can hear the bikes, but we have our head down trying to make it work.
I took a few years off of going down to Austin, but I've got tickets this year for MotoGP, and I bought the Ducati Island ticket experience. When I did it the last time, I say it was probably 3 years ago, we also got to ride on the track. That was pretty cool.
Yes, that's actually a part of the package for Ducati Island. You get to do a parade lap.
We also had a lunch one day that was served by Ducati Royal leadership. That this year as well, or has that changed with the adding of the sprint races?
That's a really great question. I don't have the agenda yet. I haven't seen the timeline, but they've done that quite a few years. So it's really special when Claudio Domenicali, the CEO of Ducati, the godfather, the ultimate, the most passionate man you could possibly meet, will serve you lunch. But sometimes he can't make it, and Jason Chinook, he's the CEO of Ducati North America. He's our leader here in North America. Just the tip of the spear. Super intelligent guy, way smarter than I'll ever be, and you get to the guy that's got the strategy and the game plan serving you lunch. So hopefully they'll do it again this year.
Yeah, I was very impressed with their humility, because there he was serving. I think he was on a prosciutto carving tray at the time, or serving olives. I can't remember, but I've got pictures of that. I've got pictures with him as well. And he was quite accommodating and very, very personable, and I was very impressed.
That's something I'd like to mention is, I've seen that over my tenure here. People come in, they're a little intimidated by the brand, and they're expecting us to be kind of egomaniacs, or kind of like that Pretty Woman scene, like just, run her out of the store like, oh, you're on a Harley, or look at that crummy Suzuki you're on. But at least when you come into this environment and when you go to MotoGP, you're going to find out from the tip of the spear, from the top dog all the way down to where the rubber meets the road, like me. It's we're just there to kind of spread the love and the enthusiasm and just the spirit of motorcycling. Because if you look at it, it's a small industry. It's always been kind of flat, and we have to stick together. So we don't want to be snooty. We want everyone to have a great time.
And there's so much pride when you pull up on your Ducati, though. It just feels good riding it and just starting the bike up, and it's just a piece of art. And I have fallen in love. I have two now, but I absolutely love my Ducatis. I still have the Diavolo I ended up buying, but I bought a Multistrada recently. I bought the V4S, and actually some of it had to do with reviews I saw you do. You've got kind of a YouTube channel of your own, do you not?
It's not my own. There's been talks of myself doing my own YouTube channel, but currently it's AMS Ducati, AMS Ducati Dallas, our YouTube channel. I do all the videos and reviews, and I approach that in a way of the reason I feel like I can sell products. I don't care if it's a watch, if it's a pencil, if it's a motorcycle, is I think I'm one heck of a salesman because I'm one heck of a consumer. I love to buy fun stuff. So what would I want? What kind of experience would I want from a dealership? And then also when I do those videos, what do I want to hear? Like, what's important? And it's not just a sales video. It's like, I've got a 30-inch inseam. I ride a Multistrada V4. Here's what to expect. I've noticed this. Try to give them the information that helps them pull the trigger.
I did not know I wanted a Multistrada until I rode one, and that was a big mistake. Because I've got the V4S, and I lay awake at night thinking about it after a test ride. It's just an amazing animal.
It is. I've had 4 Multistradas now, and I've ridden quite a few that aren't my own. I made one YouTube video where I mentioned I broke in the Multistrada RS, kind of the top dog for someone, and I've had multiple people now have asked out of state, or Texas is a big place, so if you live in West Texas, it's like going to Arkansas pretty much as far as time and distance. So now I've actually created a situation where people are like, it's a concierge service of, Marty, will you put the 600 miles on it? I'll pay for the break-in service. And that way they don't have to turn around and come back and see my ugly face for the first service. So
do they pay the traffic ticket as well?
Yeah, the toll fees and the tickets. Yeah, I haven't signed a contract for that because that RS is a fast bike. But the Multistrada is a conquest bike. It is. I have watched BMW, Triumph, Harley guys come in and ride that bike, and they go, holy mackerel, this thing knocked my socks off. It's got personality, it's got spirit, it's really fast. And on the other end, if you find the diehard Ducati guy that's been around since the 90s and they love that freight train torque and kind of the on-off kind of roughness, they actually they think it's too smooth. Sometimes they're like, oh, it's too much like a BMW.
Well, and my story is kind of strange. I was actually at the local dealer on an open house day. I was in the negotiations to buy a BMW, and I was going to buy a cruiser, an R18B.
Okay.
I had it picked out. We had the numbers looking at. I already knew what I was going to do, and they had the Multistrada sitting there, and it was a used bike, and I was intimidated by the size of it because I'm not tall either. And I was intimidated by the bike. I rode the R18B again. I've ridden it several times, and I was pleased. And I'm friends with a local dealer, and I said, throw me the keys to that. So they said, take it. And like I said, it was a used 21. And I rode it, and then I ended up getting on the highway, and then I decided I wasn't turning around and going back for a little while. And I just kept riding it, and I didn't want off of it. And then the next week, I'm like, I take the bike back from the demo day, and I thought about it every night. I'm like, that was just an amazing beast.
Yes. I've had people go for a demo ride and I can just see it. I can read them pretty well. I'm like, why don't you take a week to cogitate about this and this experience and then call me. And if you'd like to ride it a second time, please come back and we can ride it a second time. Typically they just pull the trigger, the next weekend, but sometimes they'll have to take a second ride and they go, yeah, this thing is just insane. I've never had anything like it. So it's a great bike.
And I still have my 2013 blue and white Diavel, and I thought I'd keep it forever. But after riding this, I'm not sure I'll go back to it. This is such a beast, but also it's tame in traffic, travel, it's everything.
Yeah, it's Ducati's knocked it out of the park, if you ask me. Obviously, I'm biased with this polo on that says Ducati Dallas, but I shoot straight, and I'll give an honest answer. And this bike, there's big talk about some of these diehards where we've gotten rid of the desmodromic valves on this bike. And we've moved to the valve springs with 37,000 mile service intervals now. It's about creating the complete solution for that category of rider. And I think it's a grand slam because now we have these big service intervals. You get a smooth operator when you want it. If you choose to get the Akrapovic full race exhaust, it has hints of sounding like a MotoGP race bike. When you get on that on-ramp, nobody's around, and you go, let me hit this thing. What I like about that Multistrada with the exhaust, though, is if you're on the open road cruising, the sound isn't droning. It just doesn't wear you out like the old 90-degree twin. So great touring bike. I consider it a sport bike that's comfortable, but yeah, I think it checks all the boxes.
I have not added the exhaust. Should I look at that?
I would highly recommend it. It's you're asking the wrong person. Every Ducati I've owned has had a full race exhaust. As I normally say in the showroom, Ducati partners with people, they make the exhaust first, and then they develop a bike for the exhaust.
Yeah, my Ducati has, I call it the tiramisu. That's my slang for the name, but that's what I have on the Diavel.
That's perfectly fine, because even when I went to Italy and I said, Terraminioni, they're like, no, Terraminioni. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I said. I said Terraminioni. They're like, no. And you're like, what are you going to do? Yeah, we have some funny names. Most people in Texas or this part of the world say Akrapovic, but it's actually, they're Slovenian, I believe, so it's Akrapovic, and then it's Terminioni from the old days.
Now, have you been to Ducati in Italy?
I just got to go. 17 years in the business, and I owe a lot to Jeff Nash, the owner, over the years, but this was the icing on top of the cake for me, because I'm bought in. Probably I would never work at a different dealership. I wouldn't work in this industry if I wasn't right here. When he gave me the news, I just couldn't believe it. It just didn't hit me until it was on the plane. So my fiance and I got to go spend a few days in Bologna, eat the food, drink the wine, sip on some Negronis, and see the oldest university in the world there in Bologna, Piazza Maggiore, and then visit the factory, which my body was in shock. I had goosebumps the whole time, just didn't know what to say. And I just didn't take it in like I wanted to. It was just a dream. And then after that, we got to drive down to, the real reason we were there was for the World Ducati Week, VUDIVU, WDW. And I still can't believe what I saw, the amount of Ducatis in one place. It's a different culture of riding down there. People in shorts and tank tops with like a modular helmet and cigarettes, just riding from 3 hours away to come to the Misano World Circuit right there on the coast. And as far as the eye could see at that circuit, it was just Ducatis pulling in, just a sea of red and yellow and tricolore, and nobody does it like Ducati. Like when you visit the factory, you realize it's an honor, and that in that community, it's an honor to work at that factory. Like you can. This was the end of July last year.
That's why I was confused, because I know it's about. I get the emails as well, being a Ducati member, and usually it's in July, but I haven't seen the dates for this year yet. So it's in July usually, is it not?
It's every other year.
So it's not this year; it's next year then.
Yes, and although there's no messaging, there's no communication currently. Any the Ducatisti, if you just love motorcycling and you own a Ducati, if you have the time and the money and the means, next year you have to go. So in 2026, that's going to be the 100th anniversary of Ducati. So it's going to be a big old party.
I need to do that then, because that's on my bucket list to go, and it's usually in conjunction with a MotoGP event as well. Is it not?
They time it so where it's in between. The reason it's not. One, that track, the Misano World Circuit, could not recover from that kind of event. And I think, I can't remember if someone from Ducati, I think, was telling me that there were more people in attendance for World Ducati Week than there is for a World Superbike race at that circuit. And just the amount of hardware and trucks and facility and infrastructure Ducati brings, there's just no way. And the other reason that it is in between races is because World Ducati Week, the main event of the whole thing, is on track, and it's the race of champions. So all of our World Superbike riders, all of our MotoGP riders, all the way down to British World Superbike, they all get practice sessions, and then they all race against each other. And if you go back and look at last year, these guys aren't playing around. Marc Marquez actually in the last corner, you can argue this either way, but from my vantage point, Marc Marquez ran off Bolaga, who's a World Superbike contender right now, a racer but contending for the title. Did really well last year, ran him off the track. These guys, it's supposed to be kind of a recreational race, but they're serious. If they're on the track, they're serious, but yeah, it would not be in conjunction with a race because they're all there.
I need to plan for that for 2026. You brought up MotoGP, and we talked about that at the very beginning, but there's been a lot of changes this year with MotoGP, with the riders and a lot of shakeups and that kind of stuff. Ducati chose Marc Marquez over Jorge Martin, and then Jorge Martin's out. So let's talk about this past weekend. You saw the races in Thailand?
Yes, sir. So Ted, I saw the sprint race and the full length race, the GP itself. I mean, before I talk about the race, it's really unfortunate for Jorge Martin. I've been watching MotoGP for quite a while sometime, and it's really strange to have the number one plate not racing the first weekend.
The second weekend, he's not racing next week either, I don't think.
No, how could he? So, I mean, it's pretty tragic. He's not my favorite racer, but, I like competition. The guy goes out and has that really bad wreck in testing and fractures, one hand. And then he goes and has surgery, starts to do rehab, and then he goes and gets on, I think, a super motard. He gets on a motard of some sort and has another training incident and breaks his other hand. I don't know if it was metacarpals or if it was a phalange, but so he has two bad hands now. It's tragic.
Yeah, he's a very aggressive rider.
He was trying to make a name for himself. I think he knew what kind of hardware he had, and he knew what he was capable of, his skill set, and he knew the hardware was capable of a championship. Even with being on a privateer, a secondary Ducati team, not the factory team, he was fighting for the championship, and then eventually won it. He knew that he deserved that factory spot, and then now you get into that. As a fan of MotoGP, you start to make up an idea. You've never met any of these guys, but based off of their interviews or their reactions to certain scenarios that happen to them throughout the season, you start to find your favorites. And Martin has a pretty good fan base, but now you have to look at the business side of it. And you mentioned it. Ducati had picked Marc Marquez, and from where I sit and how long I've done this, I mean, it's obvious. And we have to talk about another name, Enea Bastianini. I actually liked him more than... I was really rooting for him over Pecco and Jorge Martin for quite some time.
He finished strong last year.
Yes. Yeah, he's a really smooth... He's an amazing rider. He doesn't qualify strong compared to most, but as a full, and even in sprints, I wouldn't call it a weakness, but it's not a strong suit. When you get in a full-length GP race, Enea Bastianini just starts to eat away at people as time goes on, and quite a few times we got to watch him come back from a very far position back there and now get on a podium. So I started to root for him. I was rooting for Pecco too, but going back to the business decision, you cannot ignore the force that is Marc Marquez. If you go to, it doesn't matter if it's Asia, it doesn't matter what continent you're on, he has a huge fan base. So in turn, there's your merchandise sales, there's your, so.
You're going to sell some hats out of your tent with the number 93 on them coming up pretty soon.
Correct. I actually have some stuff here that I can't talk about that we're only allowed to sell down there, and it's going to be even tough to get after the event. Yeah, in that apparel store, there's going to be some Marc Marquez gear that is going to be unobtainium, and we'll sell out the first day. And it's unfortunate. People come in on Sunday and they just get there for the races, and they're like, "Where's the Marc Marquez gear?" And I'm like, "We sold out of that 48 hours ago, all 230 of like one shirt or one hat." Yeah.
I'm coming into town Thursday and staying through Monday, so I want to. Several years ago when I was there, the local Ducati shop in Austin had a little thing with the riders one night, and that was a Thursday night. So I'm kind of hoping that happens again. I don't have any word on that, but I'm kind of hoping for that.
I am too. That's still a big question mark currently, because you have to think about riders and their contracts with sponsors and the factory. They only have to fulfill a certain amount of events, extracurricular activities. So it's really up to the team, or it's really up to the manager of the rider and the rider themselves on at which GP do they choose to go do these events. And typically they do it, so I'm hoping for it, but it's always up in the air until kind of really the week before.
Something I'm kind of new to the sport, and I've watched Ducati being a dominant force, but when I saw the first race in 2015, it was Honda. And actually it was Marc Marquez that won that race I came to. But then Suzuki was in it for a while, and Suzuki just pulled out totally, and they had good seasons. But Yamaha and Honda and Suzuki, they fell off, and Ducati got ahead. Was that due to concessions? What do you think was attributed to that?
There's a lot of moving parts in the motorcycle industry that go from MotoGP all the way down to the bikes that are in the showroom. And there's quite a few things to talk about here, because you have to look at these Euro emissions year after year, Euro 4, Euro 5. These factories have to produce bikes for the street, but they also have to pass these emissions tests, and it's gotten harder and harder to do that. So we watched over the past few years here, several years, people like Suzuki, they couldn't get a leader bike into like the European market to pass. And Ducati, if you one example I'll pull out of the hat is like the Scrambler. It's getting harder and harder to make, say, a liter-sized motor pass these emissions. So you've had certain Japanese manufacturers pull out of certain markets. Certain models just aren't even available. And you bring up concessions, and that's a mechanism in which they're trying to keep at the highest level of motorcycle racing in the world. They're trying to keep things fair, and I can't really speak to why we saw such a decline in the performance out of the Japanese manufacturers. I can speculate if you like, but they had Marc Marquez, and they had such a long run of doing well. At one point they had Casey Stoner, who won a world title on a Ducati, right? And then he went to Honda. Interesting enough, also on the other end of that, you had Danny Pedrosa, who was always the number one bridesmaid, never the bride, but the guy raced forever. Danny's I bumped into him one time at a Indianapolis MotoGP, and I love that guy. He went to KTM, so he left. You got guys switching left and right, but I guess to get to the bottom of it is, I don't want to say they were lazy, but resting on their laurels, but Ducati is always wanting to be competitive from our World Superbike heritage. Nobody has more factory World Superbike titles than Ducati. That's kind of our bread and butter, and I think they've been working real hard, and they went through just really low times for a long time in MotoGP, and really worked hard. Got Gigi, Paulo Giabatti, who's now the head of our MX, our off-road campaign. Pardon me. So these guys, Ducati just spent big money on getting some wizards in as far as engineers and planning, and I think the proof is in the pudding. This was coming, but I just think it came at a time where the Japanese manufacturers, Quartararo on the R1 or on the Yamaha, I love that guy, and Honda with Marquez. I just didn't think they saw the storm coming from Bologna, and I thought they were kind of on autopilot. And you're also looking at, this is just me speculating, you're also looking at really big companies that make jet engines, they make planes, they make frigate boats, they make pianos, like they're in so many other things. And then you have these little Italian dudes in Bologna, and they do one thing. And before they die, they want to conquer, some champions. So I think there was just it was the perfect moment in time, and now we're unfortunately seeing a lot of complaints about it's the Ducati Cup, not only in MotoGP but also in World Superbike.
Well, there's dominance. They finished top of the tier last year, and it looks like they're going to do it again. Without Jorge Martin, it really wasn't a show yesterday either. So
right, yeah. Well, that's someone to keep an eye on is Ayagura. So he's a rookie this year.
I hadn't heard his name before, but he did a show yesterday, didn't he?
Yes, when you're a nerd like me for motorcycles, like you watch the Moto2, the Moto3, you watch all the races, and I've watched him for quite some time, and it seems like he has the right mindset, and he's not bothered to play with the big boys on big hardware. So watch out for him. And Jorge Martin's going to come back. The guy is he's too talented, so as soon as he's healed up and his mindset and his confidence is back, he's going to be right there with those guys. But it's interesting to see the Marquez brothers now fighting, and Pecco it's just one track. It's kind of like World Superbike 2. Top Rock on the BMW went from being a world champion last year to telling the press, if it continues like this, I'm just not going to race. It's just a Ducati Cup. I'm a small fish in a big pond, but if I could talk to him, I'm like, you're a world champion, that's one race. Wait till you get to Europe. Top Rock, you're going to win some races here. And with these concessions, Ducati, we have less motors. We're considered A tier, so we have less motors than the Japanese manufacturers. We don't get to test at any GP circuit. We have to designate 3. We have less tires for this season than the Japanese manufacturers. So hopefully they come back. Even me, who's diehard Ducati, I want to see Jack Miller on a Yamaha, fight for a podium. I love Jack. Bezzecchi.
I love his personality. I love his, like you said, we just get from interviews, but I love his personality and his sarcasm and his humor and all that, just in interviews.
Correct. I think Texans, Oklahoma, I think Americans can relate to his personality with, Australians. We think they're kind of like the Southerners, like we are here in Texas. But there's a lot of good riders, and I think you're going to see the Japanese manufacturers take advantage of the concessions. There's a motor freeze, though, so that was a huge thing in testing this year in MotoGP because Ducati had a new package, and they called it the 25. Pretty much Marc Marquez and Pecco both agreed that it was better to go with what they're calling the 24.9, or last year's setup. and they were more comfortable with it. And I believe under hard braking is what they were describing. Is it's just it's a smoother bike and more confident for them coming into the corners. I could be wrong on that. So they did not use that new motor, but the reason there's a motor freeze is we're kind of in a position here in the next 2 years where this generation of MotoGP is going to end, and in 2027 it's going to go to a smaller displacement, less aggressive aerodynamic package. I believe there is not going to be the ride height launch device, and it's almost like Casey Stoner kind of got in the heads of FIM and MotoGP, because some of those old school guys are like, these guys aren't riding anymore. They're getting used to all these electronics and all these widgets and gadgets that are helping them. Some of the old school guys wanted to go back to like it's the rider who's making it happen. So in 2027, it's a huge shakeup. It's going to be I think an 850cc motor.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So this may have nothing to do with it, but like look at the new models coming out for Ducati. Kind of the backbone of Ducati has been this 937 950cc 90-degree twin, and now coming out late this spring is kind of its replacement. So the old motor you found in the Hyper Motard, you found it in the Monster, you found it in the Super Sport, which the Super Sport's going away, and now we have a slightly smaller motor that's dipped into the high 800 cc's. No longer desmodromic, so that's going to be fun. People complaining about that, the diehard Ducati guys. I believe we also have a cam phase in there as well. So, totally different motor, but it's interesting to see we're going to have street bikes for 2025 dip down into the 800cc class, 896. We have the mono Hyper Motard, that's a different motor too. But in 2027, MotoGP is now going to have this smaller motor that's going to be 850cc. So I think you're going to see manufacturers coming out with bikes and testing things to get them ready for 2027.
Interesting. And you talked about the new bikes. Ducati kind of went toward the off-road world further than the Multistrada with the Desert X. I guess kind of the Scrambler. And now they've got kind of a dirt bike out too, right?
Correct. So the dirt bike, I believe the plan is for it to hit the North American market sometime in summer, July, August, possibly. We don't know the price of that bike yet. Paulo Giabatti, who was leading that team, they went out and won quite a few races. I believe they won the championship in Italy with that bike. But it's a different story over there because, it's kind of like football in Europe and American football. It's a different world, right? So the big aim for us here in North America, Ducati's, the factory, is to get into Supercross, which is a different animal. So that's a tall order, and they're planning, to come and find a rider and be competitive. But yes, we're going to have a really cool dirt bike for, the people that aren't aliens on motorcycles like you and I, who are just motorcyclists and actual humans. That will hit the market in the summertime. We had the desert sled that was a scrambler. So that had 7.9 inches of travel, and had that big suspension, came with some knobbier, more off-road capable tires. But it was just too heavy. It was still an 803cc motor, about 75 horsepower. So it's fun to go down a dirt road or check your fence line on the ranch, or urban assault in an urban environment. But now we've got real off-road capability with the Desert X, multiple styles of that, and now we've got the dirt bike coming. Pretty exciting times.
Now down the road, and we've been pushed over with electric cars and stuff like that, and Harley made a run electric motorcycles and with a live wire and that sort of thing too. What do you see down the road for motorcycling, and are we going to end up going that direction too? Because I'm not going to like it, but is that what we're going to be at down the road?
I think it's pretty fascinating. I think we have to also take a look at the auto industry, because that has stalled out for them as well. You've seen some manufacturers really take some massive back steps and step away from that in their strategy. So motorcycles started to get into that live wire. I want Harley to do well.
They spun it. It didn't do well, and they spun it off to a different company, so it wouldn't affect their bottom line.
Correct. I mean, I think Yamaha's done it. We've done it. Ducati has come out with e-bicycles. So initially it was all these e-bicycles. We have a road bike, the Futa. If you ever see my ugly face and my name in the obituary, it's because I was riding that bicycle and I didn't die on a motorcycle. We have that carbon fiber road bike called the Futa, named after a pass in Italy, and it's just a rocket ship. when you want it to be. So you can still get a workout and get a ride in if you bump it down. But I'm getting off topic there. It's just an insane bicycle. But we make mountain bikes and we make road bikes now that are e-bikes. And you even see it there. So locally, you have these hard-headed, hardtail mountain bikers, or even if it's full suspension, they don't want to see you out there. Some of them don't. There's a small percentage who's like, oh, you're on a cheater bike, or, that thing's too heavy and it's going to cause ruts because it's putting down too much power. And on the motorcycle, on the street side, it just hasn't caught on. It hasn't gained the respect. I was just over the moon that in MotoGP, there's the E-class.
Right.
And Ducati got the contract last year. We made it's one manufacturer that makes the bike. That way it's even for all riders in that E-class of MotoGP. And I just couldn't even get people in our club excited to come watch it. I do watch parties here, and it's just nobody's really into it. They don't make any noise. They're real heavy, so if a rider goes down, these little tiny jockeys, they're not strong enough to pick up this heavy electric bike. And if you look at the live wire, you look at anything electric, it's kind of stalling out, so it makes people kind of timid. And let's talk about the motorcycle side of it for a second. You're trying to make a two-wheeled vehicle where the greater power to weight ratio makes it more fun. So the lighter it is and the more torque or the more power you can give it, the more entertaining, the more lively, and the better experience. So you're trying to bring a technology in that makes the bike super heavy, which changes the experience. And then now we're going to talk about how aggressive you are on this right here. So for me, a lot of these electric bikes that have come out, I could make it home, but I can't come up to you in Oklahoma and go, let's go to the Ozarks, So it doesn't really align with the current motorcycle experience as far as rideability, the feel, the enjoyment. Now you're having to stop to charge it. And then let's be honest, we're kind of the last cowboys in town. Like, we're probably a dying breed where we still love the smell of gasoline. It's like, I can't wait to fill up my bike at the gas station and I'm going with 93 and let's get after it. It's different when you got to plug in.
Let's transition a little bit. I've heard about your start in motorcycling. So you've been in it for 20 years now. You're in the dealership all day, so you're actually working in your hobby. Where do you get to ride and what do you like to do? You mentioned tracks. Are you still doing tracks, or do you like to travel and go do the Arkansas, or do you do other roads and get to ride down around Austin? What do you get to do for fun on motorcycles yourself?
Yeah, I would tell my younger self, or I would tell anyone younger than me, be very careful about working in your hobby, because it depends on who the person is, but it could really destroy it. And at times I've hit some low points where I just don't want to be around a motorcycle. And we can talk about that and the other hobbies that keep me entertained. But you kind of reinvent yourself as you know. As we grow older, we just we become a different person. So I started off wanting to race. There was nothing existed besides race bikes, super bikes. Never looked at any of the other Ducatis. It was just that what's the super bike coming out for next year. So last year in 2024, a really good friend of mine, Mr. Pippin, him and I got to go, and another friend, we got to go ride Big Bend. And I think that's why I stepped into Multistrada so quick. I went from super bikes to a Monster, a couple hyper motard models, and then bam, right into four Multistradas. I've taken Multistradas to Coda. I've ticked off some novice riders on super bikes at track days at Circuit of the Americas with my Multistrada. It's got crash bars and highway lights, and I'm dragging a knee and just tearing it up. No, some of the most amazing experiences I've had, kind of those soul-searching experiences, is like riding to Colorado, heading out to, the skirts of the Weminucci, like getting to Durango, doing the $1 Million Highway, and getting up to Ouray, and, just getting to high altitude. Arkansas is probably still the most underrated state in the entire union for motorcycling.
Beautiful riding, yes.
You can't go, it's a state where literally you can have no plan. You just wake up from your Airbnb or hotel and you're like, we know we're going to leave on that road, but you can come to a four-way intersection and just go left, right, or straight. Just flip a coin, because whatever road you choose, it's the best road you've ever seen.
I'm a V-twin guy too, and I've got Harley Davidson, and I just recently may have or may not have bought an Indian motorcycle, but Bikes and Blues and Barbecue is just a fantastic place, and just got back from there this past fall. And You're right. You can take a left or right, whatever you want to do, and just have beautiful riding. It's not that far from either one of us.
No, it's funny actually to get to start getting into the pretty parts of Arkansas. It's the same distance for me as to Austin. So and you mentioned that earlier. Austin's a great place. The hill country down there is phenomenal, and Texas barbecue versus all the other states barbecue. You can go down that road, but yeah, I absolutely love Arkansas. And actually, we have a new X Diavel that just came out that they just advertised, and it looks pretty amazing. So I think that's something I would put in the ear of Ducati North America or anyone I can, is Ducati needs to start reaching out and like getting to that event there in Arkansas. Which I always say it wrong. It's not Bikes Barbecue yet. Blues Barbecue. Yes. We should really get into that with our new X Diavel and our V4 Diavel. So, but to answer your question, yeah, I love kind of that long ride where I get to kind of get in my own head and talk to myself, because all I do is jib jab, and I give 100% of myself to the people that contact me, and I want them to have a good experience, and I want to treat them like a queen or a king. So for me, it sounds a little weird, but it's about being alone and doing some soul searching.
I told you, I admitted that you and I aren't close friends, but more of acquaintances, but I followed you on social media. I told you do a good job with the YouTube, but you also like outdoors. I see pictures of you fishing and that kind of stuff. So are you a hiker, a fisherman, a camper? What are you when you're not on a motorcycle?
Yeah, yesterday, I don't know if you can see my face and my neck, but I'm a little red, especially this big German nose here. I got a little too much sun. I was out on the Brazos River, which is just southwest of the DFW area right here, and went fly fishing with a friend. So if I am not at the dealership, I am typically fly fishing. Or hunting. So I'll take I have a really good friend who's retired military, and he's the tip of the spear. He's an absolutely amazing guy. And I don't like what we call Elmer Fudd hunting, sitting in a deer blind waiting for the feeder that's exactly 100 yards away. I like to, once again, go do kind of that soul searching, like test myself physically and mentally, and get into the Weminuche Wilderness of Colorado, the Nez Perce Wilderness of the Panhandle of Idaho, and get back in the food chain. And all of a sudden you realize all these problems you have day to day just don't exist. And you get to see Mother Nature, test yourself once again physically, mentally, and then harvest meat for family and friends. That's what I love to do probably the most right now in life.
That's awesome. Marty, it's been fun visiting with you today. Remind us how to get in touch with you if they want to reach out to you at your local dealership in AMS Ducati.
Yeah, you guys can find me here at AMS Ducati Dallas. So Marty at amsducati.com is my email. You can call us here at the shop. You can find it on our website. That's 466-6540-214 area code. If you're really bored and you want to just follow just a normal guy like me, then I think it's Marty Scrib on Instagram, and that's where you'll see all the fly fishing, hunting, and then track days. I didn't answer that. We'll do a lot of track days this spring.
Marty, thank you for being on Let Out the Clutch. I've just enjoyed seeing you, and I'll see you in a few weeks in Austin. How about that?
I can't wait to see you. Let me buy an overpriced hot dog or a drink at the track, and let's have some fun. I really appreciate you letting me be on here. Thanks for doing this, by the way.
Thanks, Marty. Take care, man.
Have a good one. Cheers.
Bye.